This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording. Hello, all you kitties and hepcats and all the ships at sea. I'm Charlie Navarrete. Marianne is away this week. We usually begin with a recipe. For this week's inspiration, I turn to Winston Churchill. Add gin to a mixing glass full of ice and stir to combine. While stirring, glance occasionally at a bottle of vermouth from across the room. Pour into a chilled glass. Garnish with a single cocktail olive. If anyone needs a copy of that recipe or any of our recipes from previous episodes, drop by everyonedies.org. That's dies.org. While there, you can send us your recipes, comments, traveler checks. We appreciate your comments, most of them, and look forward to your questions, jokes, buttons, and bows. Let's start with the fun stuff. Let's start with scams, where everything old is new again. If someone or something like a recording calls and says it's from the Social Security Department and asks for your Social Security number, do not give it out. Hang up. If it's the real Social Security office, they've got your number. People or recordings pretend to be from the Social Security Administration or the IRS and try to get your Social Security number or your money. Never give your Social Security number. The Social Security office has your Social Security number. So does the IRS. They've got your number. They know more about you than you do. If a caller asks for the last 4 digits of your Social Security number, do not give them out or even to confirm them. And do not agree to pay for anything over the phone, email, or text. Social Security's phone number could appear on your screen, but don't be fooled. If the call sounds suspicious, you can ask the person for his or her name and phone number and say that you will call back. Or just hang up. So to review, remember, hang up, do not give out information, report the scam to Social Security Administration. Additionally, don't click on pop-ups or attachment if you don't know where they're from. Never share your password with someone on the phone. Don't allow anyone to control your computer remotely. And speaking of scams, guardianships or conservatorships like Britney Spears. Not all of them, of course. Oh, you want to know the difference between a guardianship and a conservatorship? You say potato and I say potato. So let's define our terms. A guardian or conservator is responsible for decisions about the care and living arrangements of, someone. A guardianship or conservatorship of a state is responsible for a person's property and finances. Now, in some states, the term guardian is used for both scenarios. In other states, the term conservator is applied to both situations. In plain English, remember when Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz is chanting, "Follow the yellow brick road, follow the yellow brick road," and reaches a 4-way intersection, then asks Toto, "Which way do we go?" And suddenly from behind, she hears a voice say, "That's a very nice way," spins around to see a scarecrow pointing. She asks, "Who said that?" Toto barks, and while Dorothy explaining to her little dog that scarecrows don't talk, she hears a voice say, "It's pleasant down that way, too." She looks up, sees that the scarecrow's arms have moved the opposite direction, and while she asks Toto, "Wasn't he pointing the other way?" she hears a voice say, "Some people go both ways." And mentioning nothing about sexuality, his arms are now pointing in both directions. Now that that's clear, when older or disabled adults are found to be unable to manage their affairs, the state might step in and assign them a legal guardian to control their finances, medical decisions, etc. They become a ward of court and supervised by a guardian or a conservator. The idea is to protect their assets and well-being because they've lost the ability to do this for themselves. But this also gives guardians almost complete control over the people in their care, leaving them open to be taken advantage of. In some states, in Texas for example, guardians can earn commissions on selling their ward's assets and draw wages not only for themselves, but assistants and lawyers. A 2001 article in the New York Times wrote of a lawyer who served as guardian for senior citizens. He brought a birthday cake to one ward's nursing home and charged her estate $850 for the visit. On another occasion, he took her to buy an ice cream cone and charged her $1,275. Good thing she didn't ask for sprinkles. Rachel Aviv, in a New Yorker article from 2017, examined guardianship abuse. She focused on a retired Nevada couple, married 57 years, when professional guardian April Parks arrived at their home and forced them to move to an assisted living center because, without their knowledge, Parks had filed an emergency petition to become their guardian after convincing a judge and, with a letter from a physician's assistant who had had one appointment with the husband, that the couple were unable to take care of themselves. Turned out that April Parks had won control of hundreds of wards over the years, just as in the movie I Care for You. After just 10 minutes in front of a judge, Parks became their permanent guardian, sold off their belongings, and changed their insurance. They were forced to see new doctors who prescribed tranquilizers and painkillers. The couple's daughter got journalists to investigate. They found abuses in the system, and the couple were freed. Parks, her husband, lawyer, and office manager were all indicted on multiple charges. Parks had worked with medical facilities and lawyers to scout potential clients and had instructed doctors what to write in their notes to the court in order to ensure that she was awarded guardianship for their patients. Parks pleaded guilty, was sentenced to prison, and paid more than $500,000 in restitution. Go to our website or Facebook page to find links to these articles and more details about guardianship scams. Before we leave this topic, in the same article is a report about a California case which had a worse scenario. Mr. Dick Magny requested palliative care. His doctors complied, but someone reported potential neglect to the county's Adult Protective Services Agency. The county filed a petition to not only take over his health care, but removed his wife as a decision maker and ordered that Mr. Magny receive antibiotics he had earlier refused. The county won temporary conservatorship and denied his request for palliative care, which led him to suffer longer. Eventually, a state appellate court ruled that the petition to remove Mr. Magny's wife had been the fraudulent work of two county lawyers. Mrs. Magny won more than $200,000 in reimbursement for fees and pursued a federal civil rights complaint, leading to a $1 million settlement from the county. Which brings us to the new Netflix film I mentioned earlier called I Care a Lot. In it, a professional, court-appointed guardian legally, dubiously but legally, steals the assets of dozens of elderly wards. She does it again on a new wealthy Cherry, who fits the pattern. No heirs or family. But because this is entertainment, the Cherry has a hidden connection to a volatile gangster, Peter Dinklage from Game of Thrones. In real life, last year Netflix aired a documentary called Guardians, Inc. It is about elder guardianship scams, which is, and I quote, a system that controls the lives of an estimated 1.5 million adults with estates worth more than $250 billion, and that is rife with financial fraud and elder abuse. Lest we forget, scams like rust never sleep. Here at everyonedies.org, we are all about preparation. The more you know, the better you can tell people what you want at the end of your life. Makes life simpler because you don't have to make life-altering decisions in a crisis situation. Of course, if you're suddenly ill and can't speak and didn't prepare advanced care directions, then your family or friend is in a sudden crisis situation and has to make, potentially, a life and death decision for you. And if you have never talked with them about your end-of-life choices, how can they advocate for you? But even with advanced care planning, which details your end-of-life wishes, there are doctors, hospitals, and nursing homes that disregard these documents and refuse to honor a family's wishes, potentially making the end of someone's life horrible, painful, and humiliating. But families are fighting back. suing doctors, hospitals, etc. Courts are now saying that this is a compensable injury. A 2017 analysis of 800 Americans found that only 40% of people over 65 had completed an advance directive, including barely half of nursing home residents. We had directives at my mother's nursing home and would remind the staff of these documents. But now with the coronavirus in full swing, the need to honor these documents is more urgent. Now, in the time of coronavirus, more and more people are writing end-of-life instructions. But people need to be responsible not only for telling family and friends their end-of-life wishes, but where the paperwork is located. Listen, papers get lost and out of date, or people just forget about them. Sometimes your proxy has died. You know, the person you choose to make decisions for you when you're too sick to speak, or unconscious. Then what? You're screwed, and not in a fun way. You are responsible to write detailed information while everything is calm and you can think clearly of what you want at the end of your life, and to have a family member, a friend, favorite bartender. Hey, here's a shout out to you, Paul. Follow through. Again, someone who knows your wishes will speak for you when you can't speak for yourself and defend your wishes against medical providers or even family members or friends who want to do it their way instead of yours. And tell people where those papers are located. Keep a copy by your front door or maybe on your refrigerator where EMT workers can see. And your wishes must be clear. Pull the plug is only good when you're ruminating with Paul while he's pouring that second martini. And for Pete's sake, stirred, not shaken. As Somerset Maugham observed, martinis should be stirred, not shaken, so that the molecules lie sensuously, one on top of the other. And I don't care how James Bond orders his drinks. But I digress. Pull the plug is not clear. A do not resuscitate order, a DNR, is very clear. But in keeping with our theme, in Montana, a jury awarded $209,000 in medical costs and $200,000 in a wrongful life case for mental and physical pain and suffering to the estate of Rodney Knopfel in 2019. Mr. Knopfel had a do not resuscitate order and a POLST form, also known as MOLST. And actually, to sidestep for a moment, either form is a medical order that tells healthcare professionals what to do during a medical crisis when a patient cannot speak for her or himself. Also, what not to do. But a medical team resuscitated Mr. Knopfel twice, despite the DNR. He lived another 2 years, strapped to an oxygen tank before dying. The last few months, he was almost incoherent with pain, living in a hospital bed, getting morphine crushed into his pudding, according to Ben Snipes, the family's lawyer. You'll find additional stories and more information in a news article titled, Filing Suit for Wrongful Life. We have a link on our website at Everyone Dies, or go to our Facebook page, Everyone Dies. As mentioned, POLST and MOLST forms are medical orders to give to your medical provider. We have a link to both forms, state by state, including DC, on our website. Moving on. A recent episode of the radio program Fresh Air featured an interview with Katie Engelbart on her new book, The Inevitable Dispatches on the Right to Die. She discussed medical aid in dying, also known as physician-assisted suicide, which is legal in 9 states and the District of Columbia. People spoke about planning to end their life due to terminal illness or unbearable pain, either legally with physician-assisted death or as part of the euthanasia underground. You will find a link to the episode and a transcript on our webpage, everyonedies.org, and on Facebook at Everyone Dies. Here are some observations from the interview. Most people who choose to end their lives at a pre-planned moment are more concerned with dignity and autonomy, less about physical pain. People want to hasten death and not prolong their pain, suffering, and loss of control over their body functions. Euthanasia for pets are acts of mercy and acts of love. People want the same option for themselves. People feel secure they have control over their death. When people approach the end of their lives, they often have some degree of cognitive impairment. If they're older, they have some degree of dementia. The vast majority of people who choose a physician-assisted death are not in pain. Most people who choose to end their lives at a pre-planned moment are more concerned with things like dignity, autonomy, and losing their mental capacity. People fear losing control of their bodily functions more than death. They feel their lives are dignified until they need their children's help to wipe themselves in the bathroom. People don't want to die in a way that feels illegal and strange and kind of secretive. They want to die with their loved ones around them in a way that feels sanctioned and respectful. American laws on physician-assisted dying require patients to self-administer the drugs. In other countries where physician-assisted death is legal, a patient has the option to be injected by a physician. In the United States, that's euthanasia. In most countries where aid in dying is legal, people choose to die by an injection given by a physician. In the U.S., it is illegal to help someone else end their life. In America, we invent veterinary drugs specifically to kill pets. We don't design drugs to kill people. We design drugs to alleviate pain or to sedate. People work hard to obtain drugs or materials alone, without their loved ones' knowledge, because they worry about their loved ones being prosecuted after the fact. Neither dementia nor mental illness is included in any of the U.S. states' right-to-die laws. That's very different from other countries. In the U.S., many people fear dementia more than anything else. Doctors right now can offer what's called palliative sedation, sedative drugs that are given to a patient usually over a period of time. The drugs are increased proportionately. It's part of standards of care at the end of life. There are no federal guidelines on how quickly sedative drugs should be offered and how much should be offered. There is no real way of knowing when a patient is going to have access to sedative drugs until she or he is on their deathbed. Coming up, psychedelics. Just because you're done with the 70s doesn't mean they're done with you. Magic mushrooms, shrooms, they're back. Did they ever really leave, or did they just get a bad rep? A recent article titled, "Can Magic Mushrooms Heal Us?" Oregon is about to become the first state in the country to try to build a support infrastructure through which psychedelic mushrooms can be woven into everyday life for therapeutic use in licensed facilities under the guidance of professionals trained to guide psychedelic experiences by supervised psilocybin therapy. This to help people suffering from PTSD, depression, trauma, and addiction, including veterans and cancer patients. In a separate piece in The New Yorker titled "The Trip Treatment," the article describes the emerging research around using psychedelics as a therapeutic tool. Jack Nicholson and Cary Grant underwent LSD-assisted therapy. Bill Wilson, a co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, gave up drinking with the aid of a hallucinogenic plant. He considered bringing LSD-assisted therapy into AA in the 1950s, but his board of directors shot that down. When psychedelics slipped into the counterculture, they were used without therapeutic safeguards, and the Nixon administration targeted them as part of its culture war. A few healers who used psychedelics in their work remained, but they were driven underground. The case for psilocybin comes from research out of Johns Hopkins, UCLA, NYU, and elsewhere that show it to be a potentially effective treatment for major depression, drug addiction, and end-of-life anxiety. Psilocybin isn't addictive, and there is no known lethal dose. According to Todd Corthius, a professor of medicine and a member of Oregon's Psilocybin Advisory Board, If you look at the safety profile of psilocybin, it's dead last in terms of its risk of harm, either to self or others. Under Oregon's Measure 109, the Oregon Psilocybin Act, no one will be able to just walk into a store and buy magic mushrooms. Instead, there will be regulated centers with trained and licensed facilitators who are there for both the trip itself and to help people integrate the experience afterwards. Psilocybin remains illegal at the federal level. Many reformers working to change the legal status of psychedelics are concerned of too much too fast. So Measure 109 includes a 2-year implementation process for regulators and scientists to come together to carefully devise the program and to roll it out slowly, with plenty of public education and legal consideration. A link to the news article I mentioned is on our website and Facebook page. Also, clinical trials in psychedelic research and implications for palliative care and end-of-life distress are happening now at New York University's School of Medicine. Key components related to palliative care include regarding dying as a normal process and that palliative care can neither hasten nor postpone death. The push is to improve care at the end of life. A 2015 study showed that depression in the last year of life had increased by 26%. In this time of COVID, we might assume that number has risen. The NYU Psilocybin Cancer Anxiety Research Project is a U.S. government FDA and DEA approved clinical trial. Additionally, there is research on the use of psychedelics to address end-of-life distress at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. Hopkins psilocybin cancer study found that a single moderate high-level dose of psilocybin can produce substantial and enduring decreases in anxiety and depression in patients with a life-threatening cancer diagnosis. We also have a link to their website on our website. At everyonedies.org, we push to improve how we die. On a recent episode, Marianne talked about Alzheimer's disease. There are several feature films on the subject, including Iris, about the British novelist Iris Murdoch. The film goes back and forth between the young, outgoing, and dominant Iris, played by Kate Winslet, and her scholarly future husband, then jumps years later when the older and now famous Iris, played by Judi Dench, is deteriorating from dementia, while her husband takes care of her, feeling hopeless and frustrated. Additionally, there is The Father, starring Anthony Hopkins from Silence of the Lambs, and as his daughter, Olivia Colman, who currently plays Queen Elizabeth on The Crown. What is unique is that we see the ravages of Alzheimer's through Hopkins' eyes, so that, depending on how his mind is working, sometimes his daughter is played by Colman, and other times it's a different actress. His son-in-law is played by 2 different actors as well. Tony Bennett, 94 years old, recently announced he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2016. So far, he's been spared the disorientation, but his moments of clarity are becoming, quote, increasingly rare. Susan Crowe, his wife, says he still recognizes family members, but he's not always sure of what's happening around him and gets confused by a fork or car keys. A few years ago, he sold out Radio City Music Hall. He worked on another album with Lady Gaga while dealing with the disease. The album is due out this spring, but Mr. Bennett will be unable to participate in promoting it. Studies have shown that music might reduce agitation and improve behavioral issues common in ALZ, particularly music that's familiar and enjoyable to the person. Research suggests that listening to or singing songs can provide emotional and behavioral benefits for people with Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia. Musical memories are often preserved in Alzheimer's because brain areas linked to musical memory are relatively undamaged by the disease. That from the Mayo Clinic. Remember to eat your vegetables, especially leafy greens. You can exercise your brain by doing puzzles. Get a lot of sleep. Learn new things. Eat with your left hand instead of your right if you're right-handed, or vice versa. Keep in mind that dementia also exists in pets, and it's important to recognize it. Early symptoms of dog dementia are often mild, but they gradually worsen. Common symptoms of dog dementia include appearing lost or confused in familiar surroundings, anxiety, forgetting things when they were taught, like where to poop, not responding to their name or familiar commands, decreased desire to play, staring blankly at walls or at nothing, loss of appetite, and changes in sleeping cycle. Sounds like my ex-wife. Early signs of dog dementia are often misinterpreted as just getting old. As for cats, they often suffer a decline in memory, awareness, sight, and hearing, including cognitive functioning. This deterioration also affects sleeping patterns and reduces activity. They might forget the location of their litter box or food bowls. They might react aggressively. It can also change their social relationships with you and with other pets in your home. Be sure to report all changes to your pet's veterinarian. Just like your dog, don't assume that your cat is just getting old and nothing can be done. Many changes in behavior might just be signs of a treatable medical disorder. Odds and ends and odd endings. From writer and executive producer Sandy Lamott, Why Swearing is a Sign of Intelligence and Helps Manage Pain. The advantages of swearing are many, says Dr. J. Not the great forward for the 76ers, but Dr. Timothy J. Research has found that people who cursed while squeezing a hand vise were able to squeeze harder and longer. People who cursed as they plunged their hand into icy water, another study found, felt less pain and were able to keep their hands in the water longer than those who said a neutral word. The headline message is that swearing helps you cope with pain, says lead author and psychologist Richard Stevens during a CNN interview. He said it works like this. Cussing produces a stress response that initiates the body's ancient defense reflex. A flush of adrenaline increases heart rate and breathing, prepping muscles for fight or flight. Simultaneously, there is another physiological reaction called an analgesic response, which makes the body more impervious to pain. That would make evolutionary sense because you're going to be a better fighter and better runner if you're not being slowed down by concerns about pain, Stevens said. So it seems like by swearing, you're triggering an emotional response in yourself, which triggers a mild stress response, which carries with it a stress-induced reduction in pain, he further explained. Moving on, as COVID-19 continues in the United States, many pet owners are likely worried about what will happen to their animal companions if they fall seriously ill or need hospitalization. The pet owners, not the animals. As regular listeners to this program know, plan ahead. Preparation is key to ensuring the best proper and possible outcome for pets and yourself. According to Art Miller, an independent producer who hired Terry Southern to write a screenplay, Southern told him that the best example of his writing in Dr. Strangelove was a scene in which B-52 pilot T.J. King Kong, played by Slim Pickens, reads off a list of the contents of a survival kit to his crew, concluding that a man could have a pretty nice time in Vegas with some of the items. When the scene was shot, Pickens spoke the scripted line, Dallas, but the word Vegas was overdubbed during post-production because the film was released not long after the assassination of John F. Kennedy in Dallas in November 1963. A poem from Stevie Smith. Not wavering, but drowning. Nobody heard him, the dead man, but still he lay moaning. I was much further out than you thought, and not waving, but drowning. Poor chap, he always loved larking, and now he's dead. It must have been too cold for his heart gave way, they said. Oh, no, no, no. It was cold always. Still the dead one lay moaning. I was much too far out all my life, and not waving, but drowning. To end, Randy Newman performs Losing You from his album Harps and Angels. We included a live version where he talks about the song. You will find a link for it and many of the articles we quoted today at our website, everyonedies.org. That's dies.org, and on our Facebook page, Everyone Dies. This time, everyone is spelled out. That's our show. Thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for future episodes of Everyone Dies. Our thanks to our executive producer, retired Major General David Gillette, our producer Sandy, John, our technical advisor, Tom Hartman, our administrative advisor, and our friends, family, and loyal listeners who are supporting our work at Everyone Dies. For Marianne Matzo, this is Charlie Navarrete, and in the words of Dorothy Parker, years are only garments, and either you wear them with style all your life, or else you go dowdy to the grave.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.